Let's understand the three types of methods in a class in Python: the instance method, the class method, and the static method. We can see the instance method is just the same as any other method we use in C++ or Java. It's just a member function of a class. Whereas this class method has some syntax peculiar. So this is a decorator syntax. This @class method converts whatever method we write below as a class method. And similarly, the @static method function decorator converts whatever we write here, whatever the function we write below, as a static method. Now, what is the significance of it? How do we access the class variables and the instance variables? Let's take a look at this. So I'm trying to call the class method and static method and the instance method using the object reference. So I created an object of the new class. So here you can see the name of the class is new class. So I have created a object, and then I'm calling the class method using the object reference, and then I'm calling the static method and then the instance method. Let me clear the output and run this to see what happens. You can see that in the class method, so I get a reference to the new class, right? And then in static method I don't have any reference, which is static method neither has a reference to the class nor has a reference to the object. So it doesn't have any reference. So why do we have a static method if it cannot access the instance variable or the class variables? Why do we have that? Well, static method is an independent function which belongs to the class. In other words, static method belongs to the namespace of the class, but it will remain independent of everything else that goes on inside the class, right? Sometimes you may have to show this design intent of the developer to the people who are extending the code or reading the code. So having this static method tells the developer intent that he wants to have a specific function inside the class because it belongs to the class, but it should remain independent of what goes on inside, because the static method, in this case the new static method, will not have any reference to the object or the class, right? So but when you call the static method using object reference, it is ignored and just the static method is called. Similarly, when we call the class method using the object reference, so the Python actually implicitly passes the class reference to the CLS variable. So the CLS is actually a convention only. You can use any other variable as well, but generally CLS is used as the convention. So you can see that the variable X works as well. But usually we use the word CLS as a convention for the class reference that implicitly gets passed to the new class method. Can we access the class method, static method, or the instance with the class name? Let us try to do that and see what happens. Now here, when I try to access the class method, new class method is the name of the class method, and I try to access this using the class reference and it works. I try to access the static method using the class reference again and it works. But now I'm trying to access the instance method, or what you call the member function, which implicitly receives the reference to the object through the self variable. Again, here the self is only a convention. You can use any other name as well, but predominantly all the Python developers use the name self for this variable, where the reference to the object gets implicitly passed to. So this is an instance method, and I'm trying to call it with the class reference, and I'm getting an error saying that missing required positional argument self, which means I will have to call the instance method with an object only. So I can't call it with a class reference. Suppose I do this way. I just create a temporary instance here using the class name. Let me run this and it runs just as fine. So this is a subtle thing, that if you pass the reference to the object, it runs fine. but if you pass the class name and then if you call the instance method through the class name, it throws an error saying that there is no positional argument passed to self, which makes sense actually. So you can see that I can call using the class name as well as the object reference. Now let me try to access a variable inside each of these three methods and see what happens. Now here I have a static method. Right, first let's take a class method, and there is a variable which belongs to the class. The name itself is the name, and I'm trying to execute this. Here we see that I'm able to access the name variable using the class reference, which obviously is right, but I'm not able to access the instance variable, which is age. I can't access the instance variable. See, here I am trying to use the class name, which is the software engineer is the class name, and I'm trying to access this function, which is a class method, and I'm trying to access through the class name, which is all right. I can access the class variable name, but I cannot access the instance variable age. So that's where it fails. If you had called this with an instance of the class, as you can see here, I'm not able to access the instance variable at all in the class method because I don't have access to it, but I can reference the class variable, which is the name. Right, let's look at what happens if you try to access the variable inside the static method. So here I'm trying to access the function whoami, which is a static method. I'm just calling it, and immediately you can see that I cannot access the name variable or the age variable. Name is a class variable and you need a class reference for that. But if I had put software engineer dot name here, which is the class name, it would have worked because I have a reference to the class. But this would mean that I'm hard coding the name of the class in the function, which is not fair. So you should get the reference to the class through the function and then you should use it, because how do I know the name of the class, right? So you can see that in the static method I don't have access to the instance variable or the class variable, right? So both are not allowed, right? And this is true even if I were to call it with a class reference, or after creating an object, if I called with an object also, static method doesn't have access to the instance variable or the class variable. It's just an independent method that stays in the class because it is in the namespace of the class. Now let's try to access the class variable and the instance variable by using the instance function. So here we have the name as a variable and age as a variable. You can see that in display the age gets displayed properly, but if you try to print the name, it doesn't work. So let's look at this software engineer class, and then if I use the name of the class and then try to access name, it works. But again, using software engineer here would tantamount to hard coding it. The name of the class is being hard coded here, which is not right. So usually you have to get the reference to the class through a variable or an argument implicitly. So that's what you should have done. But here we don't have access to the class reference. So if you if you try to access the name variable, it fails here. So you can see that the instance method or the member function has access to the instance variable age, but it doesn't have access to the class variable name because we don't have a reference to the class with us. So these are the three types. Just to summarize, we have three types of functions: the new method, which is an instance method; class method, new class method, which is a class method; and a new static method, which is a static method. You can call all the three using the object reference or the class reference. And as far as static method is concerned, it implicitly receives the reference to the class. As far as the member function of the instance method is concerned, it implicitly receives the object reference through the self variable. Static method doesn't receive any, so it doesn't have access to the self or the CLS. So you based on these three rules, we can appropriately access the variables of the class or the instance in the class method, the static method, or the instance method. Hope you liked this video. Do give me a like and give your comments below. Thanks for watching.